Hello. Can we all have a seat, please? Wow, that's silence. Okay. So we are going to get started. My name is Naveen Bist. I'm chair for programs at TiE, so I'm volunteer here. So this is my third year of doing the programs. Sorry, I have food in my mouth. I'm sorry. So how many of you are have you come to any TiE event before?
Yeah.
Okay. How many of you are new? I guess rest. So how many of you are members? Okay, well, you should become a member. You'll get all these free events and you'll get wonderful food. And if Raj is happy, he's smiling right there, you'll get wine also. So it's a very good deal for 150 bucks, which is not even like 50 cents a day. Less than 50 cents a day and you throughout the year. For those who are new here, let me just spend a couple of minutes to tell you about TiE organization. Actually, we used to have a big banner here which used to say fostering entrepreneurship. TiE, the Indus Entrepreneur Organization, was founded in 1992 by a small group of highly successful entrepreneurs and senior executives from large companies who had succeeded in this country, and most of them came from South Asian region, and that's why the name the Indus Entrepreneur. Some of you, those who are history buffs, you may know about the Indus region, in old days, somewhere between India and Pakistan borders. But anyway, TiE, it stands for Talent, Ideas, and Enterprise, and it's an inclusive organization. Membership is free to anyone. And since the founding, TiE has grown to over 60 chapters worldwide in over 18 countries now. And all this is led by volunteers. There's a very small staff, which is Raj, Harini, and Ramesh, and Terry, four or five folks over here, and mostly it's all run by volunteers, which we are really proud of. And the mission of TiE is to foster entrepreneurship globally. And as I said, we have chapters all the way from in Europe and Sweden to Germany, UK, in Asia Pacific, in Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, then India, Pakistan, and in North America, in Canada and US, in a number of cities. There are three constituencies TiE have, charter members. These are highly successful and accomplished entrepreneurs who are invited to be a charter member. I'm sure there are a few of them. Can I see some hands, please? So Paul is also our board member, and also he's our chief marketing officer for TiE. So all the marketing efforts are led by him. And then he's met Raj. And then we have Umesh also here, a number of charter members. Then second constituencies are sponsors who help us continue to organize these programs and support us financially. So we have a number of them, anywhere from large companies like SAP, Microsoft, CA Technologies, to a lot of venture firms from Khosla Ventures to Lightspeed, a number of them, and then law firms as well as the these accounting and strategic consulting firms like KPMG, Ernst & Young, etc. Third constituency is all our members, and I would say the fourth constituency is all our volunteers. So because that's who keep this organization going. And what we do is basically all programs and activities to foster entrepreneurship. So in programs are around inspiring entrepreneurs about market opportunities and trends and what's happening, like today's panel, as you'll hear from them. And then Then we also have something called TiE Angels, which got started 2 years ago. So any of you doing startups? Or any of you, anyone looking for money? Seed money. Okay. Well, you can go to the TiE website and you can apply to TiE Angels. So they have a meeting every month. So it's so if you're looking for, the seed stage of like about, let's say, half to 1 million kind of round. So we have a number of the charter members who have been investing, and I think we have invested over 18 or 20 companies over the last 2-year period since it got founded. Then we also have recently launched a TiE Launchpad, which is like an accelerator, but I guess mostly it's focused on the enterprise type of companies, and you can see a lot of cubes there. So those who are interested, they can apply also on our website. So with that, what I would like to do is I would like to actually introduce Anup. Where is he? Anup is the founder of Clarice Technologies. In fact, thanks to him, this is his idea. He approached Raj. He says, "How about doing a program on design?" So we are all. So I said, "Of course," because as you know, design has become a very important element in part of any startup these days. In fact, some of the firms, even I think Khosla Ventures has a fund around this design-based companies. I think some of the VCs have started that too. So really appreciate Anup's taking the proactive role in organizing this event. And Anup, as I said, is a founder and CEO of Clarice Technologies, with his co-founder here, Shashank, who is going to be moderating the panel. Earlier, he's led a lot of business development for Mindtree and Wipro in Europe and US. So with that, let me hand it over to Shashank.
Thank you, so a quick introduction. Naveen got probably confused between Anup's background and my background. So quickly, I've been into the field of user experience design for the last 20 odd years. I worked at Veritas Semantic, built their user-centered design functions before starting Clarice about 5 years ago. But I think the reason we're all here is to talk about how design have led to successful products, and we have put a very eminent panel together. I think the format that I'm going to follow is I'm going to very quickly introduce you the panel, and I'm going to ask them to do a sort of opening remarks, about 5 minutes each, and then there are some questions that I'm going to pose them. I'm going to be monitoring the panel, and then I'll also pass the mic around so that we could get some questions from the audience. I just wanted to check how many of you are building products. I mean, how many of you either okay, quite a bit of them. And do you have? And the second question is that how many of them have some UX help available? Okay, so that's okay. So okay. Very quickly, so this is the panel that we have. Anup, who's the event organizer. We have Greg, who is the general manager at GE. He's joined us. We also have Rachel. So she's the senior director and at Oracle. We have Steve, who runs Portical Consulting. Very focused on interviewing and talking to users, and he's going to talk a little bit about the benefits of talking to users. Then we have Sandeep, who is a senior director at Yahoo, and I'm Shashank. I'm going to moderate the session. Very quickly introduce the panelist, Greg. So he comes from GE. Prior to that, he was working at SAP. Prior to that, he has a significant experience in. He spent his time at New York Stock Exchange, where he brought very creative approaches to solving some business problems. He's been with GE for the last 2 years, and what I'm going to ask him, since he's worked with organizations like SAP and GE, I'm going to ask him how is he inculcating the culture of bringing the design-led thinking in large organizations. So that's one topic that I'm asking to talk a little bit about. Then we have Rachel here. She has close to about 20 years of experience. I see her background. She's done a lot of work in consumers. She's also worked in enterprises. She's worked at Apple, Disney, and also at Oracle and Yahoo. I think she's done significant research in how you can create products that can bring meanings to your life, and I think that's the topic that I'm going to ask her to spend some time here. She has several patents, and she's a BFA from San Francisco Art Institute and an MA from Notre Dame University. She's also an active teacher. She teaches in 2 institutes, I guess, is that correct? Or you used to teach it? Steve, I think Steve has authored a book, Interviewing Users, and the book talks about how to uncover some compelling insights. He probably is one of the most experienced designers. The last close to 30 years, he's been working in several companies, organizations in mobile devices, medical information systems, packaging, financial services, video conferences systems, and I guess he's going to talk a little bit about some iPod accessory that some insight that he uncovered to come up with some ideas there. He's a regular speaker and he's a very active blogger. You can look at his profile and go to portugalconsulting.com, and there's a lot of articles that he's blogged about. And he's, like I said, he's going to talk about the importance of talking to users. Whenever you're working on a product, I think it's very, very crucial and important to talk to users, and he's going to talk a little bit about that. Sandeep, senior director at Yahoo, and I think he's probably leading one of the most impressive portfolio of search, local maps, shopping, and answers at Yahoo. He has close to about 18 years of experience. I think he's one of the person who's designed motorcycles in his earlier earlier life, and then been very active in designing user interfaces. He's built teams. I've seen his work very closely, and he's very passionate about innovating, especially very strategic innovation that you can apply to products. He's built teams at Veritas, Symantec, and also he's doing that at Yahoo, back in India as well as here in the US. I think he's going to talk about a very important topic: how do you measure impact of UX? With that, I wanted to. There's a little bit of context setting that I want to do before we move on. I think way back in 50s, when engineers wrote code, I think it was important that it worked. So it was like if you had a sort of a expense reporting to be done, you will just have to ensure that it actually worked in the environment. So the whole emphasis was whether the software did the task that was required to do. As we moved on, I think we started a little bit getting into details of saying, okay, who is the user and what are his requirements. So it was now trying to look at some human attributes and trying to see whether he's able to complete the task. So that was all human-computer interaction. Later on, it was a little bit of how can you improve his productivity, or how can you do this in lesser number of clicks, or less number of time, and things like that. And that was all about interaction design and ensuring that you can do it faster, quicker, and better. Slowly, we started thinking a little bit beyond the screen. So let's say if you take an example of Oracle expense reporting, it was not just how quickly can you fill the form, but also what is the whole experience, who are the other players involved. So it's not just fill a form, but also how will it get approved, when will the money be paid in the bank, and what was the entire interaction. So it was a little more holistic thinking, and that was required, not just screen. And this was all into the B2B space, and we're still talking about that's happening between the at the business angle. But slowly, things started moving into B2C, And that's when we started thinking about, what should be the visual experience. And it was important that a lot of people made an initial impression in the first 50 milliseconds when they saw a product. And then that's when we got further into this whole aspect of user experience design, where we are now talking about how can you design something which is more that can trigger the right emotions, especially when you're doing shopping or you're trying to do booking for your travel or hotels and things like that. And this is now further moving towards what we call it as consumer-to-consumer interaction, and that's a completely different sort of a playground, which we have not even kind of gone there yet. So that's one, and I believe I think every one of us sees several beautiful products in our day-to-day life. There are hundreds of products that you will interact. But how do these products affect us? I mean, there are three levels at which these products affect us. One is at the rational level, which is that I talked about. How can you get things done quickly? And your email and you're getting some documents written and things like that, all that fall into that category. The second is the emotional, where it will something that will build element of trust or something that we care about. And so let's say if I go and choose a particular travel site or a travel booking site, I think I'll most likely pick that on some of these emotional triggers. But the third and the most important thing is products that bring meaning to the life. And there are few products like this, but one that I can name, and I'm also going to talk, this panelist is going to talk more about this. An iPhone is one such example, a product that really brought meaning to life. With this context, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Greg to make a few opening comments, and then ask Steve and Rachel and Sandeep to talk about and then we'll open the questions. Greg?
Thanks. So I just put a couple of quick slides, and I was asked to talk a little bit about culture, and have some experience at SAP. We were brought in to try to help change the culture of an engineering-led company. And at GE, it wasn't sort of to change the culture, it was sort of more to how do you insert design into sort of an engineering-driven culture. So what I thought I'd do is just give you a few sneak peeks of things that we're doing, and then when we have the conversation as a group, a little bit more color will come out in the conversation. So when I talk at GE, I always use this slide. So this is my favorite slide to use. And why do I use this slide? I use it with executives, and I also use it with engineers, and I use it with anyone and everyone inside the company. And the reason behind it is, what is this little girl doing? Right? She's holding a cell phone, but she probably doesn't think it's a phone. She's probably playing a game. And her parents probably gave it to her to distract her or do something. But there's something interesting going on here. She's actually in a location. The phone knows where she is. There's a GPS in the phone. She's in context. She's connected to a network. This is her first digital experience, or close to one of her first digital experiences. So she's learning to be digitally native through mobile technology, not through the PC. She's going to work for GE in 20 years when she gets out of college. She's going to buy GE products at some point in her life. She's going to be an influencer. She's a digital native from the start. She lives everywhere in the world, right? She doesn't just live in the United States or in developed countries. Mobile phone technology is the primary computing platform for the 7 billion people on the planet. So she is the future. And if we don't understand how to design for her, we're doomed. And her expectations of how the world is going to work are totally different than ours. And she's just going to expect that the experience that she has with modern technology is going to be different than the way that we think about it. So I use this as a cultural change object in an organization. People get it because we all have children, or we know people have children. And they can relate to this, and they've seen this, by the way. You see it all the time. The other thing I do is to appeal, and this slide is kind of burning out here, and it's not important to actually see the detail, but GE is a very measurement-oriented culture. We measure everything. And success in GE is based on, it's a very merit badge culture. So if an executive is doing really well, everyone else wants to know how did they get there, and can they emulate that and do the same thing. And so what we do is we appeal to their rational side about the value of doing good design. So we have all sorts of statistics that we talk about, and most of these are external benchmarks, but customer expectations are shifting, UX reduces costly errors, speeds time to market. I can actually make a credible case, and I actually have facts inside of our organization that for every $1 that an executive invests, they'll get $2 back. And that's a pretty good rate of return. And their development teams will be faster, their products will be better if they adopt good design. So we appeal to their rational business mind and say, get on board, and it's not a minor investment. You don't just get one guy in a room to do it. It's a big investment, and it may mean deprioritizing other things that you have on your docket to make it happen. So we do a little bit of that. And then we work on grassroots. So again, this is kind of washed out, but we built a community. So if I'm going to talk from the top down with the rational conversation, from the bottom up, I want to connect all the people inside of GE who are doing design or have an affinity towards design. And so we created this place called UX Central inside of the company. And it's an online social community for sharing best practice. And we're not a governance organization. We promote best practices, but what we really want to do is have everybody start sharing what they do and share their knowledge and invite people to participate. And we're big believers. It's a big tent. You do need people who have experience with design, but you can teach anybody to do good design with some effort. And so this is a way for us to create that community, help people who might be the only designer in a GE facility, let's say in Cambridge or in Cincinnati, and they feel alone. Now they can feel like they're part of something. So these are kind of some of the tricks of the trade that we're doing, and we can talk a little bit more about that. And then the last part, which is very important, is getting executive support. So we're very lucky. Jeff Immelt is investing in design. He's investing in software. If you're aware of some of the announcements in the Bay Area, we created this software center of excellence in San Ramon. We're putting $1 billion into building software capability as a company. It's hard to do good design in an organization, whether it's small or large, without executive support from the top. And getting software right is very important to Jeff right now. It's his #1 initiative. And he actually doesn't understand that design matters. Now, he can never remember my name. That's probably okay. There's 300,000 people in GE. But he does know me as the UX guy. And I'm fine with that, right? So as long as he knows I'm the UX guy and he listens to us, then we're in good shape. So I'll pass it on.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Yes. So I was asked to talk about meaningful, and what does that mean? So we're all familiar with this. We've all been there. That hunting and pecking on the keyboard, getting your stuff done. But really, that particular experience really is, you're going to see quite a bit of today, and you'll see probably a couple different versions of this slide, is really looking at what we've been referring to as REM in the design industry. So rational, emotional, and meaningful. And so the rational is the functional experiences, so very kind of more to the core root, form, function, usability, does it work? Emotional is, well, does it elicit an emotional response? Is there an emotional connection with that product? Very different way of designing and approaching product development. And then also meaningful, which takes it up to kind of a third tier of that meaning is really, it's become a part of you. So you were talking about, making the iPhone reference, for example. I mean, how many of us have that relationship with their phone, whether it be iPhone or something else, that you may not want to admit that it's become a part of you? And it's part of you, it's your life, it's community, it's society. And so then also looking at, meaning is very different for everybody. And so how do we design meaningful products and meaningful product experiences and services that will really make an impact and make a difference for everyday people, for your community, and also for society. So, reframing the slide that you saw originally, but really looking at this there's a couple different ingredients that are really important to making this work, and that is that aspect of surprise. So, this is Zyda, and she here is, it's that, I get it. And it's that moment, that facial expression. It's the noise that she made of, that there's starting to be a connection that happens, rather than kind of the mundane hunting, pecking with your computer. And that's where you're starting to get those emotional connections. And then also delight. So it's, but, and she's making connections, she's making references with herself, her family, her community. And then also this aspect of togetherness, so in connecting. So here she is, she's taking her mobile device, that's part of her, and sharing it with her mother. And it's their kind of relationship that you have with a product is much more than just doing a design. You're creating ultimately an experience. And when you look at it from the experience standpoint, you're looking at the full life cycle, the whole ecosystem of that experience, because these are all different touch points of the brand. So it's not just the device, the software. It's not, it's also looking at the whole life cycle around, that when you order, you get it, you receive it, you customize it, you personalize it, you make it your own. And then also, what is the next life of this particular device too? Because now it's become part of you, so then what happens with it? And there, are definite, that part of that emotional and meaningful aspects of that. So you're really looking at the full life cycle of that experience. So a few questions that we ask ourselves. What's going to make the product meaningful? How can we affect positive change? What about the bigger picture? Bigger picture with your iPhone, for example, in this particular example. What's going to happen when you go in to recycle it at the end? What happens to the parts, that part piece of you? There's a separation. More than we probably care to admit at times. What kind of impact to society does it have? And so how are we enabling and bringing these experiences together? So here's I have a couple slides. This is something that I did back in January with the team at Oracle. And the reason why I'm showing this one is because this was a product team of 22 people that were really, they were in the conference, they're in conference room, they're in their cubicles, and they've been focusing for a long time on what they thought were these problems that needed to be solved. But really, what we ended up doing is, within the course of one day, took them out into the field. So this is Apollo Hospital in Bangalore, if anybody is familiar with it. And actually went out and did observations and interviews with doctors, patients, nurses, doctors' assistants, caregivers, and talked about people about their treatment and their health care. And what the team thought was a problem in the morning ended up was not actually the problem at all. It was something very different. So by giving this opportunity for them to go out into the field and immerse themselves, they came away with much different ways of approaching the problem. So we did things like we looked at a problem statement, we did a focused brainstorm, we did lots of prototyping. And not just looking at digital, but also getting them out into actually making tangible things. Because you never know where inspiration and unique opportunities are going to come from, and new ways of approaching a business and new ways of approaching an opportunity. So, and this is about really making products that are meaningful for everyday people, and how it's going to make a difference in their lives and bring people together.
Here's a picture of Pacifica where my office is. And the phrase that we use, I'm known as a user research person. That's kind of that's what I'm representing, I think, on the panel. But just a little bit in terms of how we describe that. We never talk about doing research. We talk about, and I think it's what we're all saying, sort of what the outcome of that is. And it's to help people discover and act. And those are two really, I think, important verbs. So how you discover something, there's lots of methodologies. And how you act also is very different. What is that going to impact? Is it going to impact the product, the strategy, the internal culture? So there's kind of two elements there in terms of what you do by doing research. And then also that not only do we learn about customers, we also learn about ourselves. There's no, there's this platonic ideal that you could commission a study about how millennials are using mobile technology and sort of get the answer. But the answer is highly contextualized based on who you are, what you think, what you believe, what your presumptions are, what your history in the market is, what your biases are. So this kind of discovery work is very sort of personal, intimate, and kind of about the teams and the culture of the organization themselves. So that's why I unpack my company's mission statement for you. We work with lots of companies. You can tell I'm like a consultant because I have that slide in my slider. Lots of logos that you recognize. Okay, and I'll just pitch you this very briefly. But you mentioned the book. Thank you. If you go to this URL or if you Google my name, Interviewing Users, there's a website where you can buy the book if you choose. My last name, Portugal, is a discount code for 25% or something. But also there is, if you're interested in this topic, there's lots of articles, presentations. There are templates and tools that you can use to help run a user research study that are all there to be downloaded. So that's my excuse for pitching you on that. All right. So I want to tell a story with a little bit of detail to it, and then I'll pull some of the points out. And this takes place before the iPod, if we can, the iPhone. If we can remember a time before that happened for us. I think it was the summer that it came out, and we were approached by a company that is a well-established maker of kind of computer and computer device accessories. They make cases, they make things that connect this and that, and they were really interested in the iPod category. Oh, people are using these things everywhere. And there's not really any accessories. We make accessories, but there's kind of cases very generally. But they did a quantitative study, and they found kind of by number the frequency of locations where people were using iPods. So commuting, at work, at home, outside exercising, outside non-exercising, inside exercising. You can imagine what that kind of report looked like. They said, okay, well, here's where the percentages of usage are, and there's no accessories. All we have in the world out there is that jogging thing. People know that jogging thing, right? It goes on your bicep. That's the only sort of use scenario-specific accessory. They said, we're really smart. We have great designers. We can solve these problems. Go find what the problems are. So we found people that were, based on their list, people that were actively exercising with their iPods and commuting to work with their iPods and all the different kind of things. And we had those people, we had them take pictures of their accessories and pictures of their clothing and pictures of themselves, kind of doing these activities. And they sent us all this stuff. And then we went out with them and we drove in cars and jogged on the beach and walked dogs and went to school and went to work and kind of saw all these behaviors going on. And so this is me, it's a recreation because I can't show you the picture of the guy, but we were talking to a student at Berkeley, and we were sitting in his, he had shared a house with a bunch of guys, and we were sitting kind of in the living room, and I wasn't even running the interview, I was kind of sitting off to the side, and the guy who was running the interview says, could you show us what happens when you come home from work, or come home from school? And so, he kind of put on his backpack, he did everything, he walked outside, and he kind of came up to the door, and he took his earbuds out and opened the door and kind of came in. And I just happened to be sitting someplace where I could see that. And, I said to him, why did you do that? And he said, well, I didn't want to be rude. And not to us. He was fully recreating this example with his roommates. I said, why would that be rude? Because I didn't want them, he says, I didn't want them to think that I wasn't present with them. And I said, well, couldn't you turn the volume down? And he says, well, yeah, I could, but it's about what it tells them. If they can kind of see it, I'm sort of idealizing how he explained it to us, but, what became clear from this and all the other interviews was that this transition point between I'm by myself and so I'm immersed in my music, and now I'm with other people, and I have to forget the audio part. I have a visual message to deal with. That this idea of rudeness was kind of being socially constructed. This was not in the product, right? This is coming from culture and messaging. And he didn't have a way to work around this. And so that's why you see people with, they're hanging with their friends and they have one earbud in and one dangling. Like that is, if you're sort of an acoustic engineer and thinking about how stereo works, that's a horrifying thing, right? That's wrong. You shouldn't use it that way. From a design point of view, this is a terrible thing. But from a social performance point of view, that's the best workaround that people had. And we went back to our client and we said, you know what the biggest problem is here? The biggest problem is that it's not about these individual use situations. It's about the people transition between them through their day. And that's where the biggest pain point is, because the thing kind of breaks. And there was crickets on the phone when I said this. They said, well, we've committed a lot of resources to understanding the specific use problems and how we're going to design solutions to those. I said, but the biggest problem that people had is this. They said, well, the thing that we've committed to. And then, so here's me, being so enamored of what I've learned, I failed to listen to them. I said, oh, okay, we have learned a lot of things about each of these things. And we have this new problem we've uncovered. I said, oh, great. Let's work on that new problem. And so this is really interesting. There's all these kind of layers to it. I'll stop there and just give you some of my takeaways here. One thing is that, and this is sort of some general points here, we weren't necessarily trying to sell products to these people, and therefore that's who we would have to study. We were trying to understand a larger set of behaviors and uncover things. So takeaway is, who you study in research is about revealing things, not necessarily who you want to market to. That might be one difference between market research and this kind of UX research. We weren't evaluating a design, we were uncovering a problem we would then design to. So the research with users took place at the beginning. Here we found things that were cultural, and we changed, the outcome is not just insights, it changes how people think and talk about who they are, what problems they're solving, who their customers are, what they care about. So the output can be at a really rich and high level. And this is what you just said, Rachel. The problem shifted just by doing this. And just, it's truncated here, but my point, I think, is, sometimes people push back on doing research because it takes too long. And I feel like, wow, we spent about 8 weeks and we uncovered what I didn't describe here is the 2-day brainstorm session where we came up with solutions to these needs and many other ones. There are, I think I can say confidently, there were a number of multi-million-dollar product opportunities that came out of this. Whether they pursue them or not is not really the point. The research provides these kinds of significant opportunities, and I think that's a great investment of the time. And that is the end of my time here, and we'll just skip to Sandeep. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So, in my 18 years of design career, I've been asked this question probably a zillion times, that how do you measure the impact of user experience? So there was this phase where people said, okay, we know you design screens, you design products, but what is it really, what value does it bring to the table, right? And that's where I started thinking of this whole concept of UX metrics. And I think this is learnings for both. Like, I have seen designers who are completely ignorant of the fact that whatever they design needs to have some impact somewhere. So it's a good thing for designers to know on how their designs are impacting either the business or the user satisfaction. It's also important for business people, like the product managers or business analysts or stakeholders in the company, to understand what role design can play. And we go back to this triangle, the rational, emotional, meaningful, because I've seen in many places, whenever it comes to UX, people tend to gravitate to the lower part of the triangle, really looking at is the new design driving me more page views, more unique users? Shall we do search engine optimization to get more people in? So, as we get to the end of the quarter, should we put more ads on our pages? So this is where I think we elevate the definition of user experience, where you say, what are the kind of metrics we need to look at an emotional level? What are the kind of metrics we need to look at from a meaningful perspective? And you're probably aware of some of these, where
if the user gets really wowed by the first experience, he'll probably become a loyal user. He will advocate the product to a few more people. That will automatically get in more people than what SEO or social referrals could get in. And then I think what Rachel talked about, meaningful products, that definitely help build a brand recall. I think some other good examples of meaningful products are products that help your aspiration in life. Like LinkedIn is a good example where it helps me with my career. Any kind of products related to education are good with, help me grow as a person. So if you build in features or experiences that bring in those meaningful values, you can start measuring them in terms of some of these metrics like net promoter scores or brand index, direct access to your products, and so on and so forth. Right? So definitely, if you plan to engage any user experience folks with your product, do ask them this question on how they measure the impact of the services. So one thing that I think has worked very well at Yahoo for many years, and definitely now with our current CEO, she really believes in this, what she calls as the money-making cycle. But it really starts with building great products with great experiences, which ensures that you have loyal, engaged users, which automatically will result in either your ad revenues if you're ad monetized company, or subscription-based revenues. And this will help you actually funnel higher investments into building more even better products. So I think a lot of time we have seen people skipping investments, definitely in the early stage of the product, where they tend to say, let's build in more functionality, let's spend more money on marketing, rather than spend more time and investment into building better experiences. So this is, I think, a fundamental different viewpoint that I want to put across. So one of the frameworks that I have tried to put down for internet-based products like Yahoo is what I call as the assert framework, and it really maps to the product lifecycle. And this is where I provoke all my designers to say, how is design contributing to these steps of your product lifecycle? So first is like, how does design help acquire new users? Now, so there are various levels. Like the user could come in through search engine optimization or through social referrals, but there's this important step of how do you onboard the user quickly? Can you get a user to sign in using a single click? If not, I can guarantee you that half the number of users will drop off. They'll not complete the process. Right? If you have got users from your social referrals or your search engine or any other channels, in most internet products you get only one opportunity to really engage them or really hook them. And that is what I call as the second stage, which is in your first visit, are you able to surprise, wow, amuse and intrigue the user enough so that he feels like bookmarking your page, remembering your page or your site or your product, and feels like coming back, right? And that is a much higher return than spending more money on SEO. The third one obviously is, okay, you have got the user hooked in, do you engage and retain? And the way we design products is, this is the first time the user is coming in, this is what he wants to see, this is the 10th time the user is coming in, this is what he would like to see. And those two experiences, the two kind of screens and the designs could be completely different. So the third part is really engage and retain, and then revenue and task simplification throughout. Like your design has to contribute to revenue without really compromising on the other aspects. And task simplification throughout your product is again a given, which again is the rational part of it. So that's a kind of framework that we have used. I think lastly, I also want to put a disclaimer, because I probably would talk a lot about metrics and data. I also want to put a disclaimer out here that data cannot foster disruptive innovation, and that's a belief that I have. And I don't have data to support this, but I think here's a thought, right? Who before the rise of social network could have ever predicted that social network would be big, right? Nobody. Because there was no precedence to social networks, there was no data which can say. So data only talks about what happened in the past, it can never talk about what will happen in the future. And that is where I feel what Steve talked about, insights-led innovation. I think that is a fundamental piece where you can you really need to look at user insights and behaviors to suggest what that disruptive innovation would be. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. So I'd like to get started with a few questions. So all of us have been in the industry for a very long time, and we've seen that UI and UX people are nice to have, they're good to be around, but necessarily not the. So what has changed in the last few years? I mean, do you when let's say there's a new product that's getting launched or a new feature that's been, do you get a seat on the table to discuss, and are you kind of sitting with product managers or the business managers to bring in your viewpoint? Is that starting to happen? And is this sort of still dipstick, or this is pervasive? That's what I want to ask. And I want to ask these questions to all the big companies first before we get to the consulting. Rachel, starting from you.
I think that for user experience to be very successful, that you really do need to have a seat at the table, because you ultimately are a key important, you play an important role in defining what that product is. I mean, it is a collaborative process amongst a cross-functional team, and everybody's bringing their different disciplines to the table. But really, you need to get these people all need to work together to really make it happen. Especially when you're looking at unique opportunities, approaching things very differently, innovating in ways that you may have never thought of before.
So do you get a seat? I mean, are you called? So whenever there's a next version of Oracle product being,
it sort of depends, right? We're in the environment that we're building right now in San Ramon. We're in that beginning point, and I would say if it's a incremental change, we might not be involved early, and that's okay. And I think actually one of the things that's happening right now with some of the presentation technology frameworks and the ability and agility to make, we can kind of course correct. So in those kinds of projects, it's actually changing UX around a little bit, where we can kind of make and then do research while we're making, and that works okay. When you're in space where, I think Stevie sort of identified this, and I think you talked about this a little bit too, that people will tell you what they know, but they can't tell you what they don't know. And in an environment like ours, where we're taking on Agile and how to make actually isn't really the question anymore. Like, platforms and tools are getting easier. It's what to make is the actual big challenge. You need design skills actually help, and our own development teams are actually starting to recognize that we make them work better. And I can prove that. And so we have metrics that say, look, if you engage with us early, we can cut your development time down, or the number of people that need to work on a project, because we get it right the first time. So I think it's incumbent on us to fight the battle. So in that organization, we have days where we take 2 steps forward, and that's great, and we take a step back, and then I feel like I'm ceding ground that we've already fought for. But the UX community and designers in general have to sort of stand in the ground and say, look, this is important. I think organizations are starting to realize it. And I think we have Apple to thank for that in a way. I mean, the moving to the tablet and to smartphones is driving a kind of reimagination of, and it doesn't match the skill set of the development organizations very well right now. And so design is actually critical for them to sort of figure it out.
I think the couple of thoughts here. One is, if you look at any product, there are 3 pivots to it. One is what we call as the business viability. Will this product sell? The second one is the technology. Can we really build this product? And third one is what we call as desirability. And desirability is where the user experience part comes in. I've seen most companies, and justifiably so, focusing more on the technology piece and the business piece first. Like if you can't build it, there's obviously no question of selling it, right? Or no question of that being desirable. So I've often seen that once in the maturity of the technology, you have the technology established. Like in case of cars, like all cars are like you can pretty much assume will run the same way. That's where I think the user experience piece starts playing an important role.
Okay.
So I've seen that happen a lot, particularly in the consumer industry. I think the second big piece is who's really the buyer and the user. I think that's where the enterprise products and the consumer products tend to differ a little bit. In enterprise products, it's probably the CIO buying a product, and the user who is using it is completely different. So the for the user experience, it's not such a gating factor. I mean, at least in the past. But definitely in consumer products, where think of a mail, Yahoo Mail or Google Mail, whatever. If I don't like the experience, I'm going to walk away, right? And I'm the buyer, I'm the seller. The product is doing its own advertising. There's no separate budget allocated for advertising. So all that rolls up into one where experience does become fundamental. And I've seen those are the companies and products where design gets seated at it.
Okay, that's good. Thanks. The other question that I have, and this I think comes up a lot in enterprise products, I guess, is are you designing for the user or are you designing for the customer? So there's a subtle difference between that. So customer is the person who signs a check, and the user is the end user. So how often you get into a conflicting situation? So we're starting with Steve. I mean, do you get into a situation where whom are you designing for?
Yeah, I think my job is to highlight the gap between those things.
Okay.
Well, in fact, I think there's a third constituency, which is sort of ourselves. So people inside the organization. If we look at how LinkedIn is an example that came up, right? And, you know, I'm assuming everyone in here, given you came tonight, is on LinkedIn. LinkedIn starts this, and I'm speaking here as a user now, this annoying pop-up that wants you to endorse people and do these things, and it kind of gets in the way of your experience. And I'm going to hypothesize that is serving something that's important to LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. That, you know, there's data that they want to aggregate, and it makes the network stronger, and it brings value, and, you know, increases stickiness, and all these kind of the metrics that are not really, they're not even the metrics at the bottom. They're kind of, you know, data metrics. So, yeah, sure. Anytime you go out and talk to people, and you talk about we've all talked about looking at every aspect of the experience. You understand there's choosers, users, there's people that have the consequence of what you're doing. I think the biggest and hardest thing to move, and it goes back to culture, which is trying to highlight, look, no one cares about this and this thing. You care about that because that's how your team is rewarded and incentivized, but the experience that you claim to try to create manifests itself very differently over here out in the real world. And I think try to bring that perspective in and get it into those meetings where people speak in acronyms and take for granted that this, of course, is what they're here to do. I think that creates all sorts of pain. I mean, this is what you guys fight with every day, right? But that, I think, that's the equation for me.
Okay. Yeah, so do you have this problem with your company, designing for the user or designing for the customer?
I think it's less of a problem nowadays than it used to be, even 5-10 years ago. Mm-hmm. Because I think that there's the industry just as a whole has evolved nowadays. Mm-hmm. And so it's actually very open to have conversations any time about, you know, well, this is the customer and this is the end user. Okay. And sometimes, you know, I've got to do the, you know, bring it back up that, well, yes, but, you know, it's about everyday people that are using these systems and these products and services, you know, in their work, in their home, on the go, and so on.
Okay.
So I remember when I worked for Veritas, and Veritas made and sold data center software. So we are often faced with this issue where we were told that don't make it too simple, because after we sell the product, we also sell consulting services. So that so if you make it too easy, we are going to lose the consulting services, right? So I think that is a perfect example of designing it for the customer. But then I go back to my metrics and say, okay, I'm losing some revenue, short-term revenue, by not doing the consulting business, but I'm probably building a much higher loyalty by making products very easy to use.
Yeah. But I think when companies work from quarter to quarter, I guess that some of those are important.
Just to add one quick thing, we're very early in that journey. So in GE as a whole, the sort of understanding of the value of UX is very, very low.
Okay.
And we have a lot of product managers who are proxies for users. They will start a project and they'll say, "Well, we know what the users want," and it's sort of like a shopping list, right? They need 2 bananas and some milk and some coffee, and that's the features that we're going to provide. And there's no prioritization to it. And because they're often come from that industry and have been in it for a very long time, they're experts. So they have they have an opinion about what's important. And what we've done, and we did this at GE, and I did it at SAP as well, is we do workshops to sort of break that training. And so we'll take solution managers and force them into a design problem. And we've done it in the Bay Area where we take people to BART stations and have them design a ticketing experience by interviewing people buying tickets. We have in GE, since most people at GE travel a lot, we do a workshop around redesigning the television entertainment in your hotel room, because everyone's an expert and everyone's sort of befuddled by trying to find the right channel if you're trying to watch TV in your room. And they go through that process, and there's this aha moment sort of right before the very end, where there's a key insight that was absolutely critical to delivering like the winning solution or the best solution, and they didn't know it. And it's because they were observing actual users. And so that's the part where we try to get people to break the habit of being a proxy, and get them to understand that we really actually have to have access to people who are going to be using product.
So before I pass the mic around, I just have one more question. So how do designers work with your technical teams? I mean, is that process all smooth and anything that you feel that has kind of become better in last few years? And, a lot of I think development has also moved towards a lot of agile methodologies and all that. So have designers adopted? Have your teams adopted some of that?
GitHub and sort of quirky sites that designers look at and kind of cringe, but the developers think are awesome and are really useful. And then in the process of doing that, we discovered that there is a certain way that they like to communicate, and there's a certain style to how they like to consume information. And so we took the design system, instead of making an HCI human computer interaction design guidebook, which most developers, if they have one, it's in their waste bin or in the lower drawer. We took all of the reference designs that we've been creating and fully code enabled them, and then designed it for them. And that's just been awesome, because now we have this whole conversation that goes along with them, and we're meeting them in their territory. And they actually, I've never met a developer who wants to make bad software, right? They want to make good software. They just don't have the expertise how to do the design part of it. Okay. And if we can find ways to meet them in the way that they speak and not take them for granted, and I think that's actually been a blind spot of the UX community, is we've actually sort of made this us and them wall versus kind of meeting people where they are. So.
I think when you look at the entire product development life cycle, I tend to split it in 2 pieces. One is what I call as the conceptual end, where you are really trying to define a new product, a new concept based on insights. And that's where a lot of ethnographic studies, building early concepts come into picture. I believe that's not an area where you can get into agile or any of those processes. I think a lot of those are, the people involved are product managers, designers, and by designers I mean really conceptual thinkers, not people who are limited to working at a screen level.
Information.
And I think that is, we also need to include certain technical architects to support on the high level aspect of whether it's feasible or not. But then once you get into the detailed design phase, we definitely work into the agile phase. And what we do there is we run close to like 120 experiments every quarter. So for such product where more or less the product is stabilized, we are not like fundamentally reinventing anything. What we do is we do a lot of design changes, variations, and we just run bucket test where 2% of the users are automatically taken to the new experience, and we see how they are engaging, how much time they're spending. So it really depends on which part of the product life cycle.
So what I'm hearing is that sort of do a conceptual design first, and then when you get into the details, that's when you do very iterative work with developers. Okay. I think that's a good point. So I just want to see if there are any questions from the audience before I move on to my next set of questions. Anyone?
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to ask you a question. So very interesting discussion, very delightful, of course. So my question would be a little bit different, which is that if you look at a product like iPhone and so forth, you know, a lot of features have already been built into it, a lot of usability has been built into it, and based on what Rachel explained and so forth, a lot of rational, emotional, and meaningfulness has been built into it, and a product reaches somewhat of a max, if you will, of capturing all of these thoughts, if you will, rational, emotional, meaningfulness. Does it mean that since that point in time, should Apple be looking at an entirely new class of a product, or should they be just keep tinkering at it? Because there's the risk of max capture, and there's of course the risk of copycat, effects, as in Samsung and so forth. And so I'm just wondering, how do designers think about that kind of a process of max capture? Is that the ultimate nirvana? Like if you've done max capture, just move on to the next product? Well, how do designers should be thinking?
At least for me, I think that we would probably reframe the question a little bit, and we would just be constantly trying to understand how people are using the tool, and looking for new insights. So if you think about the trajectory of iPhone, right? So iTunes, iPod, smartphones, iPhone itself, App Store, applications, that whole space, it seems almost impossible that we didn't have it before 5 years ago. It's actually why I think the current advertisements for Apple are so amazing, because they show the world that we live in, and it's hard to imagine a world without all those tools. I don't know what that next thing is, and that's the secret, right? The secret is actually not looking at the iteration point of that thing that you're working on. You always can make it better. It's looking at how behavior is changing and how people are interacting with each other, and then you find that moment where you create and make something. And the people who are good at it, it seems so obvious when it materializes, but it wasn't there before. And so that's kind of the art of that process. And it's a little bit about what you talked about, the early stage versus late stage. Early stage in a product's life cycle, you have to do these sort of concept car idea thinking processes. And if you're longer into a life cycle, or sort of where iPhone is right now, you're doing incremental change over time to improve the experience, but it may be harder to innovate. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
So, I think every company has to define its own vision for 5 years after, right? And some of those could be really radical. They might seem completely out of sync with what we are doing today, but those are the ones that provide inspiration for yourself. I believe, and this is a hunch, and this is probably what I would bet on, is if Steve Jobs was here, he would be betting big on Siri. And more than a voice-enabled technology, I think he had probably also started positioning Siri as a companion, a nice, friendly woman who you can talk to, you can confide into, you can seek advice from. And I probably know that there are a lot of experiments going on where you ask a question to Siri and direct answer is thrown back to you, probably. So I think that's again going back to your rational, emotional, meaningful thing, where the rational part is taken care of. Samsung has already done everything that Apple has done, probably a little better in some ways, slightly bigger in size and cheaper. Right now, I think that next part is where you bring in this emotional friend that you can really talk to, confide to, and we know, I mean, there are a lot of people who would talk for hours to a phone because they don't have anybody else to talk to.
Can I just add something, and that is that as humans, we evolve, we change. And so what may be our needs and desires and goals today will be very different tomorrow. And so that is why we also need to always be looking forward and being leading edge in that aspect as we go in to design the next latest and greatest.
I said I wasn't going to pile on, but now I am. I had this conversation this week with somebody, and it's a Fortune 100 company that has some time to not be going quarter to quarter. He said, how do we think about sort of the future of, what do they call it, like the mobile technology platforms or something? And you know that on their wall they had like printouts of thumbnails of like every screen size of a device, because that's how people that make things think about the tools. Well, we've got, phones and tablets and, pardon me for saying this, phablets, and, then we got the mini, and we got the 7-inch Android, and whatever, I don't even know what they all are, but they're sort of locked into that, and their question was, how do we even look at what we don't know that we don't know, which is why they called somebody outside their organization to kind of help them with that. And they said, we had this idea of the leading edge, and then in the middle of a conversation, they say, well, what does that even mean? What is the leading edge? And so this is now just kind of from thin air. We haven't really engaged in it, but as we started talking, we started thinking about things like the maker movement, and is it called Raspberry Pi? Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
Raspberry Pi. So things like that, Fitbit and all those kinds of things, Internet of Things. Like those don't fit in that diagram of mobile stuff, but, as you guys are saying, like the world has changed, and where the things that look mobile, it's like your little girl, right? That she's a digital native. She's doing contextual, relevant usage of data, but that's because mobile kind of owns that right now. But maybe Internet of Things owns that. So we're surrounded by other movements that I didn't have to think very hard to come up with those. You guys all know what those things are. Could probably add 4 more to that list. So. I think that's the world is changing, and we kind of keep looking out of it. And what's cool for these guys, they didn't say, no, that's not mobile. They said, yeah, that they went with that kind of provocative thinking about it. So, yeah.
I just had one question for the audience. Like 2 years back or 3 years back, how many of you thought that iPhone was cool and Apple was a cool company? Any show of hands? And today, I'm just trying to probe, I don't know what the response would be, but how many of you think that Apple is arrogant? So I think what is probably going to make or break, particularly when they have competition, equally good products, is this perception of whether they are perceived. So I think they were equally arrogant 3 years back, but at that time they were cool. So the arrogant was taken care of, right? Arrogance was ignored. Now with equally good products to compete with, I think the arrogance starts standing out.
I don't know if you've looked at, there are several very interesting ways of, how in future you'll be collaborating with your family, with your colleagues, as well as your friends. There's some very interesting videos of, the future concepts of how. And it's not a phone. I mean, it's going to be a little more than that. So your phone might be. So like I think others were saying that the playground will change. I think that's what I expect. I saw some and okay, sorry.
Yeah, actually, Sandeep has touched upon it a little bit. It's the overall design process. Do you start in rational and then try to move later on at some point? Okay, I want to make it emotional, or then okay, so you want to make it to the upper level. Is that a process that you go through, or do you go through top down? I mean, this is a question to everybody. So how does it work really?
I think traditionally we did work bottoms up. Invariably we started with saying, okay, here's some set of technologies that we have. Can we package it in a way that the users can really use them? And that happened a lot when we worked at Veritas and Symantec and all these companies. I think particularly now with the iPhone, with the mobile revolution, I see a lot of top-down approach where say, let's look at what the need out there is. Let's look at where we can engage people. Let's look at, so let me give you a very interesting example, and to some extent I'm sharing my trade secret here, but we did a study of 140, with 140 users, all in the 14 to 24 user segment. And the reason we did this was Yahoo user base is largely 30 plus. And we really had no users in the 14 to 24 segment, and that was the fastest growing segment throughout the world. So we did the study of what really motivates users in that age group. What do they do day in, day out? And when we looked at everything they did, I would abstract what they do as 3 A's, and you might want to even write them down. They're so powerful. So the first one is appearance. Like, how do I appear to my peer community? And that is the reason why social networking, Twitter, all of these are popular, because people want to go and self-express. Second A is about associations. People want to associate themselves with anything that is of social significance, anything that is popular. So that is why you see celebrities have a huge fan following, because people want to associate themselves with a celebrity. People want to associate themselves with brands. And then the third, or something like a Greenpeace movement or whatever, right? And then the third one is activities. People want to do activities together in that segment. So if you really look back at those 3 A's and say, I have a product, or I have a company, or I have a technology, and say, where can I find ideas that will engage this user using these 3 A's? So when I look back at search, the way we have today, does search let you, and I'm saying search because that's what I do at Yahoo, do we let users self-express themselves by using our search product? No. Do we let them do activities together using our search product? No. Do we let them associate themselves with any cause or a brand or anything using our search product? No. And that is where I see an opportunity. So to answer your question, this is a time where you start looking top down.
Anyone else wants to add?
No, I was just saying that was worth coming tonight.
So 2 questions. One is design really art, or is it a science? How do you see that? Because it was considered art, now you're calling it a science, so I don't know what it really is. And secondly, there are a lot of people here who are working in startups who don't have the kind of budget that you guys are used to. So what would your advice be to them that will be valuable to them? So there's one lesson from each of you that every entrepreneur in this room can walk away with today. What will that be?
So that was actually my last question, but anyway, glad that you asked that.
Remember, we don't have budget.
Yeah,
Well, I'll start Twitter Bootstrap, and I actually am in the camp that it's art, not science. There's lots of science to it, but I think the way designers work is it's about juxtaposition and the creative act. And anyone can do that. There are people who are better at it. So if you don't have good resources, go look at patterns that are out there. And there are a lot that, the Bootstrap community made a huge favor for startups, because it's a set of APIs that are easy to build with. There's a community around it. Most of the reference designs are pretty reasonable. It's really easy to modify. If you want to put styling it, you can, you send the CSS sheet out to someone who knows how to modify it for you. You can actually make pretty decent looking software pretty quickly. So those would be my 2 things.
I would say that spending time with ultimately who's going to, or who you think might end up being the end users, and then also experimenting, prototyping. I mean, prototype early, fail often, learn from it, iterate. Just that, you can take that out in the field, you can get feedback on it, and then iterate on it, or even go into co-design with your end users. And it's going to give you a very, very different insight into their context and how they're using it, where they're using it, what their needs are, their goals. But then you may also uncover, new opportunities that you haven't thought of, or new features that really would really meet that particular need or desire to really make it much more meaningful. And that's very low budget.
I think the art and science question just goes back as long as there's been anybody doing art or science or design. And I think if I think about people that influence me in the field, I think they would say that the answer is craft. And then they would probably be able to define what the difference between those three is, which I can't do, but I'll just, I like to reframe it, so I'll just say craft. But, we were talking before we all came up here, and we were talking about different kinds of design, including design that looks like art, and it's probably different than what someone in a startup needs to deploy to solve their problems, but, we contain multitudes. There's lots of different forms of design, and design that is art is solving certain kinds of problems. I prefer design that's not for the designer, but is for somebody else, and so that's where art in the work activity makes me a little uncomfortable, but art as to change our thinking as a form of design, I love that. What's a simple thing that you can do to get better with the budgets that you have? I think you kind of said it. Get out of the building. You kind of said that. And I'll just say, being a guy with a book, if you can get out of the building and everyone here can go talk to a customer or a user and learn something they didn't know without really knowing what you're doing. But you also can radically up your game very quickly by, paying for a webinar or buying a $22 book or watching a 20-minute video. There's so much resources online about how to go from, and you can very quickly go from I have no clue what I'm doing to I have a little clue, and that really will pay dividends. So, A, get out of the building, yes, and B, just do a little bit of work to get a little bit better at that, and wahoo.
Yeah, I think I have a slightly different take on this question, whether it's art or science. And if you look at the origins of these words, how long have these words been around? Art and science existed for a much longer time than design. And I strongly believe that design was a word probably invented to describe art that is mass manufactured. So when I designed motorcycles, the first thing that one of my professors told me is, design is not art, because art is take an example, somebody doing a sculpture. It's a one-off piece, right? Whereas somebody designing a motorcycle was a piece of art that can be mass-produced. And that's where I feel design was a word probably crafted or defined to blend art and science together. That's my short take on it. So I would call design as art that can be mass produced and mass sold. Really.
And your one piece?
My one piece of advice definitely would be the first founding team that you have should have a very experienced design person. Think of how you go and set up your founding team. You have somebody who is really strong on technology, somebody strong on the business side. And I go back to my 3 pivots of a successful product: business viability, technical feasibility, and desirability. So I think to fill up that third gap, I would strongly recommend that you get a very seasoned design professional as part of your founding team.
Yeah, and give him some equity and give him some stocks so he'll come on board. Okay, so
so thank you very much for excellent program, great insights. It's very easy to talk about UX when we are talking about latest gadgets, iPad, iPhone, things like that. What about the workhorse products, reporting engines, probably spreadsheets, probably something that that has a front end that nobody ever has thought of ever changing. How will UX affect those products? And can you give an example where some such product has been completely transformed when the modern UX concepts are applied to it?
Yes, I've been into that kind of business, and I've seen a lot of that. I think those products have gone through a very radical change, and I don't know if you've heard of a self-help desk kind of product, the fresh desk, and completely radically changed the whole paradigm, I guess. I mean, how you'll be using self-help, and there are several of such examples. I mean, if you look at simple things like how do you do hotel booking or ticketing, etc. I mean, all that, even internet banking, I think has gone through such a massive change in last. And these are very mundane and very, I'll call it very clinical products, but all of them have gone through very substantial change by just focusing on very, very minute level details. I mean, I believe that that when you're doing rational design, I think there's a lot of detailing and that you can go through to create a very seamless user experience. I mean, any login or a lot of those things we've seen such a massive change in last few years. Yeah.
So there's a couple of companies both with the word box in them, Dropbox and Box.com. I was looking at I haven't used their product, but I was looking at their websites. And one is a very minimalistic design. If you look at Dropbox, it's a very, very minimalistic site. While Box.com is very, I would say, complicated, cluttered, enterprise looking like. What is the view in the group in terms of the UI approaches? There are two different UI approaches. Sometimes something too simple is sparse and not attractive, while sometimes something is overbuilt.
So you're saying that something that is fast, there's not enough value associated with that, and is that the question?
That's the question, and it seems like consumer space is more towards the simplistic stuff, and enterprise is more complicated. Is there a cell which is different?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. That there has always been innumerous amount of debates around adding more features versus driving simplicity. And the iPhone that we all like, if you would have realized there's a feature that I really miss is if I'm getting 10 minutes late to a meeting, I want to go to that meeting invite and I want to click there and I want to say reply all so that I can tell people that I'm running 10 minutes late. And you can't do it, right? And that is where I think what Apple has really done is it has said, okay, in order to keep it simple, we are going to let go of some of the features which are probably edge cases. Like we're not really going to bother about that. So going back to your example of Dropbox versus the other one, Dropbox is probably trying to keep it simple and addressing probably the 80% of what audience wants. And the 20% which is going to add clutter and complexity, they are not going to add. I believe that's a good strategy to start with, irrespective of whether you're looking at enterprise or consumer.
I'd like to add to that I see a shift happening over the last year or so about kind of what you're hitting on about the enterprise and the functionality and consumer maybe being more simple. And I actually find that, having worked at Oracle for a year, that enterprise users are expecting a consumer interface in a lot of cases because of the fact that they are using these, and there is this need for simplicity. And really, again, it's ultimately going to boil down to who are your users, what's their context, how are they using it, what are their needs, their goals, and ultimately, we're all humans, and whether you're enterprise human or a consumer human, ultimately, you really are kind of got to design for what their core root needs are and what the problems around that, because ultimately you're designing a solution that will solve that problem.
I have one question.
I just wanted to add. I mean, I think none of us work for those companies or have designed them, those products in question. And I think, the meaning that you're creating by looking at them, I think is right on. And, it kind of goes to what's their strategy. Perhaps, and I'm just, spitballing here, but perhaps kind of enterprise complexity suggests more, we talked about meaning and emotion. It suggests reliability, it suggests scalability, it suggests robustness, it suggests not fly by night, it doesn't look like a startup. And so, there may be data that they have that this actually has a certain kind of appeal and stickiness. We don't know, not unless anyone here worked on those things, we don't really know. But, you can't sort of blanket say simplicity, complexity, consumer enterprise. I mean, it's what are they trying to accomplish with that, and then how is that thing that's being put out there, what's the meaning that's being created by that artifact?
Well, and you can even add to that, like, frequency of use. You can make a more expert-driven tool if someone's using it every day versus something that they use once a week or once a month or once every 2 months. It's, like always the failure of T&L expense systems, right? You only use it once a month to put your receipts in, and they expect you to remember how to use it, and you've forgotten since the last time you used it, so you don't know how to use it, right? So that could also be, to your point, there are lots of different reasons why things can be different.
One line on that. Box was built for enterprise cloud storage, and Dropbox was built for consumer cloud storage.
So I have one follow-up question on the user experience on the consumer product side. So what, from your experience, what are the latest and greatest trends you're looking in the new websites like Airbnb or those kind of websites where you're seeing the wow factor? What are your judgments of wow factor when you see on consumer websites? To everybody.
I think Rachel talked a little bit about the surprise and delight and having the excitement when you go to website is slightly different, but when you look or see or deal with the product, I think we covered she covered a little bit of that.
To me, I think it's anyone who respects context. It could be in a variety of different ways. So, what's my location? What are my search patterns? What am I trying to accomplish? Where am I? Am I interacting with someone? And then they find some delightful way to connect that moment in time, and the relevance of that moment in time to me at that moment is what gets me excited. So it could be, an affordance, a visual look and feel, a message. I mean, there are a variety of different ways to do it, but to me that's the area that I'm really interested in, is this notion of making our lives more contextual, so that when I do interact with technology, it's meaningful immediately versus me having to hunt around and look for things.
And this is an area that is shifting. And I think, we keep talking a little bit about human shifting and culture shifting. And, a few years ago we worked with a client that wanted to understand how to use the data that they have from you when you're surfing to customize the experience. And this goes back to this was a ACM Kai topic about, I forget what it was called, but kind of goes back to the 80s, right? That, and Don Norman's been talking about this forever. Like, well, it already knows this. Why doesn't it kind of do this? But the client was really smart, because their question was basically, what's the creepy line? And I think the creepy line keeps shifting. And then, we found out a couple of years ago that Google was not serving up the same objective response. It was putting all sorts of things in there. And then you think, well, that kind of, and as a user, I can't decide, well, that seems helpful that my friend's post comes up first. And you think, well, that's actually good for Google and maybe less good for me. And so I think the dialogue that we have, especially, in Silicon Valley around context, and not to pick on context, but these things they're shifting radically. And so then, Prism happens. That has nothing to do with, how we experience Google as a user, but it changes the conversation. And so what we're tolerant of, what we're excited about, there's a lot of interesting kind of dynamic factors kind of affecting those things. And I guess that intrigues me personally.
So I think you should look at the latest Yahoo weather app and see how they've integrated some really beautiful things and using the Flickr photographs and got in some nice animations, and I just happened to see that iPhone app.
So I think to answer your question, I think there's also an increasing trend to make the UI transparent or invisible. Like can we give the user what he wants without asking him to add as many inputs? A simple example would be, I want to search for restaurants. Now, if I go to Yelp or local, any kind of site, I say search for restaurants, then I enter which city, which address, whatever. Right? Now, with the geo location capabilities, we can figure out, like the user is sitting in Santa Clara, and if he's searching for restaurants, most likely he's searching for restaurants in the neighborhood. So take away all the controls that require him to select the city, show him directly all the results around Santa Clara. If he's really looking for something else, he can go and explicitly change that, right? I mean, so this is where I think it's heading. When we are looking at all the Yahoo media properties, we are saying, let the design be transparent. The user has come here really looking for content. So if the user is on Yahoo News or Yahoo Finance, it's the content that he cares about. So try and make the UI as invisible as possible. Let content do all the speaking. So even when you look at the visual designs, we are getting to very neutral kind of designs where we are getting away of all the splashy colors and the buttons on the site, where we are enriching the content so that content does most of the talking. Content creates most of the expressions.
Okay, so I think there's a question there. Okay. So I've got two different questions. The first, I'm going to be a bit of a rebel for this one, and given that you're talking about Apple so much, I've heard the saying that says that Apple products or the Mac is user friendly as long as you have not come from the PC. So now saying that, and the other thing that you brought up, that one of the important things that users look into is how cool do I look? How do I look when I use this particular product? And Apple has done a pretty good job with that, in my opinion. How important do you think this is going to be, given that there are now 10 different products which are also all cool out there, and going forward, is it just that if you're the first on the market, then it's important to get the coolness factor, versus if there are already 2 or 3 products out there, then maybe the coolness factor is not so important? I don't know.
I mean, you have to be cooler.
Okay, so
it's another parameter that you evaluate products on.
Okay, so the second thing is about discoverability of features. So when we make our UI everything simpler and hide the complexity behind and selectively show things and so on, how do you also at the same time, what kind of patterns exist out there to make our systems more discoverable to the user, so that if there's a user who wants to try out something new, do you give them help? I mean, how many people are going to read it? Obviously no. How do you make things more discoverable?
That's there's a couple of things. One is you can choose affordances that people know, right? So you have to kind of decide who your audience is, and there's an audience that has a high degree of tolerance for exploration, and they'll look at interfaces and sort of, bang on them until they discover and they realize something new, and they learn that. And then there's an audience that never knows how to do something unless it's sort of mass appeal, and a lot of people have used it before, and you have to kind of know where you are in that spectrum with the community you're designing for. So that's one. Visual design is really helpful. And the other thing I was going to mention on the last question is, one of the things I think is really interesting right now is typography. And especially for web properties, we finally can control typefaces. We don't have to set, have Helvetica, and the standard system fonts. You can deliver great type. And typography is a design tool that aids cognition, allows people to discover things, it aids legibility, it has personality, it's emotive, it has emotion to it. And it was a part of the designer's toolkit that was almost impossible to do well until the advent of HTML5. I mean, you could do it in Flash, but it was really painful. And in the HTML5 space that we're in right now, typography is really easy to control. And some of the most imaginative sites are only typography. It's really about, appealing to the way we like to read, but it's done so well, you go, wow, that's great. So I think that's a secret, is to look at investing in understanding how words are written on the page, and it connects very much to also the fact that we are having higher and higher resolution screens. So on a very high resolution device, typography actually does matter quite a bit. So I think those are 2 tips, maybe.
I want to go back to cool for a second, if I could, because I think in a room like this, when we say cool, I think somewhere a baby dolphin dies, right? And cool is this word that we say and we don't unpack, and usually that means Apple. Usually it means shiny. It means modernist. It means rectilinear. There's a great article from the New York Times Magazine about 8 or 9 years ago. It's by Rob Walker, who wrote the Consumed column for a long time. And I'm giving you the keyword so you can go search it. It's by Rob Walker, and it was a long feature about this guy in San Francisco, Alex Wipperfurth, which just let Google figure out how to spell that. It's a long German name. And he comes from the branding and marketing side of the world, not the design and technology side of the world, but his whole thing was about cool. And so one of his clients was PBR, Pabst Blue Ribbon, the beer in a can. I mean, it's this, became, I think in the early 90s, became very popular in places like Portland among bike couriers. So just imagine a very specific demographic. Numbers were doing really, really well. And they talked about, like, how do we capitalize it on this cool fact? Those are the coolest people, and they're kind of drinking this anti-beer. It's not good. It's cheap. It comes in cans. And they talk about, we should do, the Pabst Blue Ribbon PBR Rock Festival and have tattoos and piercings. And Alex said, no, don't do anything. If you push on cool, which is being created by the culture, not by the maker. I think that was a really interesting point. If you push on it at all from the corporation, you ruin it. So his advice to the marketers at Pabst was to do nothing. And there's a whole bunch of articles that are sort of about anti-marketing marketing, and I'm kind of conflating marketing and design, but the cool is a much more complicated thing than make it look like Apple, and I just want us to not walk. I want to debunk that shorthand that we use so easily and in our community so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to. Are we running out?
Yeah, I think we're running out. I think let's have that one question there somewhere.
Yeah, just one last question. I'll keep it short. I wanted to talk about this concept of simplicity, and where one of you made a comment about, I think something it was you, about stripping off features so that you could, so that you could keep it simple. So if you look at simplicity like Instagram, right? You start and say you do one thing and you take it off. So the product is beautifully designed. But every time I want to do something more, I have to step out of it, pick up another application, figure out what that application is. I think there's a borderline of where it starts to push the pain onto the user, even though you think you're taking it away from the boundary of the product, but you're still causing pain. So I'd love to kind of hear about how each of you have experienced that or fight that in the course of your design process. Like, GE makes products, you make consumer digital experiences, and Oracle makes enterprise experiences, and you're a consultant, you do everything. So I'd love to hear your experience about what simplicity means to you versus easy.
I think first of all, I didn't say that take everything out. Obviously, we need to have features in there. Right? I think what you're telling is exact description of how your product should evolve. The first launch of Instagram is probably addressing the 80% need of what the users want to do. Keep it there, keep it simple, it engages the user. And as that starts becoming a habit, like I don't have to think about how I take a picture on Instagram and upload it. That's when you introduce the next piece, right? That's like starting from kindergarten and growing every stage till you start learning more and more, right? So I think every product when we design, we rarely think of how the learning curve is going to be. And I think adding features based on how much they are going to be used and what features should be introduced first and what second is probably part of that description.
I would say, I think we all suffer app anxiety. If you look at your phone, you have way too many apps, right? And if you have kids, they install way more apps on your phone. And then you can't find the app that you need because there's like 22 games in front of it or something. In GE, we have a little bit of a different thing that we're looking at in that space, and that's because we have a kind of a controlled ecosystem. We're really interested in the notion of apps because we like the idea of chunking problems into smaller and easier to use pieces of software. But we're also cognizant of the fact that if we give somebody in the field 22 apps to use, that may not sort out what they need to do. So what we're really interested in is looking at more of kind of the Kindle or iTunes concept, where you have an app that's sort of like a player, and you have pieces of software that are chunked really small, and you allow the user to construct their own applications. And that's what we're kind of looking at in our space, because it makes sense. We can control that environment to do that. I can't say we've succeeded at that, but there's some really promising signs for us around enabling personal mashup in a way, so that you could have Instagram and then add your own functionality to it, is the kind of thinking behind it. And I think if you think about where we're headed with our smartphones and apps, someone's going to have to figure that out for us, because otherwise we'll have 2,000 apps on our phone and we'll get lost in terms of trying to figure out how to use them.
Point I made earlier about humans evolving, I think prime example there, and that the needs, the context has changed for you. You're expecting other features, other ways of using the product, and so I think that by looking at that, and then there is this evolution that Sandeep referred to of that probably did start with like the kind of the core basic kind of root type of functionality, and then adding to it over time. But I do think that sometimes too much. There is a point though where too many features is way too hard to use, because it's getting in the way of you completing really simple tasks. I mean, Instagram is an interesting example because it's become a verb in my house. And my 7th grader has an Instagram account. She has nothing else yet, but just an Instagram account, because she can share pictures, and that's how her and her friends are communicating. And so it really is starting to kind of evolve and have a much different play just in our little environment in our house. And so I'm really curious to see where they're going to end up taking it, out moving forward, because even just in the course of 3 months, the way we use Instagram is very different than we were using it 3 months ago.
Last comment.
You sigh sadly as I hear.
No.
I apologize for whatever I'm about to say next. My wife and I are like total film nuts, and we're those people that go to another city and go to a film festival and go see 20 movies, in a week. So we're those kinds of people. So we use Netflix, and we use Netflix streaming, and I started doing this thing a few months ago where the second that the black credits come up, or the black background with the white credits come up, it goes in this little shrinky window, and an ugly ad for other movies comes up. And like, that's an emotional moment at the movie where they just fade to black, and the song is playing, and you're crying or laughing or whatever, or you want to know who that was, you want to know where it was filmed. Like, if you love film, you stay for the credits, right? That's just, and Netflix put in this feature that has some functional benefit, because it helps you rent another movie, which is what they want you to do. And what I realized through that, and I talked to some people about this, they're like, oh yeah, no one used that when we didn't have it or something. Like, I may be in the exception, but my realization was that Netflix is not a cinema company. They're not a movie company. They're a data company. That's why they have VPs of content acquisition who write on their post about how we've acquired content, as opposed to we have a new show. So this is a long way of saying, like, who are you? What are you about, and what kind of experience do you want people to have? And to choose the things that you do and don't do, features that you include or don't include, to kind of be consistent with that. And so Netflix kind of tricked me. If I had a company that was a movie company and not a data streaming company, I would probably, my experience would be more aligned with what they want to create. That was sort of a rant, and it sort of answers your question. And I'm sorry, I'll just put the mic down.
No. That's good. So thanks. So I just want to end. You want to say something?
No, I don't.
Okay. So I think we had a very, very interesting discussion. I'm sure we can go on, but I think we're already running late. So I just want to end this discussion with as a thought. So what is common among these companies? Yeah. No. So they have designers as their founders. So these companies have designers as their founders. and I'm just showing you a few names. But if you look at the whole this thing, and this is, I can't fit all of them onto the screen. So if you look at all these companies, I think they've created tremendous wealth and leadership by just having designers on their board. So I want to end with that thought. I think one message, and you probably heard a lot here, is that look at who your customer is, identify your customer, go out, talk to them. I don't think it's expensive at all. It's all doable within the budgets that you have. Start on a sort of a design journey which you can, first of all implement it in pieces, but refine it as you go on, and I'm sure you'll find success. So I'll end with that. I thank everyone. I think we had a very, very interesting conversation, and would love to do that more often. So thank you very much, Sandeep, Greg, Rachel, and Steve. Before I end, I just want to hand it over to Anup so that he can thank people who have made this possible. Thank you.
It's 9 o'clock, and I'm sure we can go on for another hour with this energy levels which are there in the room. Again, really thank you so much, the panel here, for really engaging and insightful discussion we had today. Thanks to Raj, Naveen, and the entire TiE organization for making this panel discussion and reality. I think I'm very excited about the outcome of this panel, and I think I'm thinking, and with the support of the panel members and more going forward, we'll try and basically put at least once a quarter a panel like this, talk about user experience and what's going on in that space. So hopefully we'll have similar engaging panel discussions going forward. Thank you all, and thank you all for taking time to join the discussion.